Hello guys, my name is Piros Katsios and today we're going to show how can we achieve attribute-like validation in Blazor coming from the server. What do I mean attribute-like? I mean the actual validation that is out of the box in Blazor with the attributes. For example, in here I have a simple form with a first name, last name and an age. If I hit create, we get some validation errors that are coming, let's see, in our project from that attributes required, and the range should be between 1 and max value of integer. Now we're going to see how we're going to achieve that coming from the server. For example, I may forgot that required in the first name, and in that range I accidentally pressed 0. Okay, let's see the rest of our project. It's called validation in lack of a better name. Anyway, we have our create person VM and we have a create person page. It's a simple form with the data annotations validator and the validation message for each property of our model. Our model is the create person VM, and we have a handle valid submit method that creates a new request, a create person command, and we try to send that with our mediator. If the result is succeeded, we initialize again our create person VM, and we have two catches here, one for the custom validation exception. We're going to see what's that. It's a validation exception and a general exception, because maybe we want to display if it's a validation exception the message different than a general exception. Now let's go into our commands, and we have a create person command which takes a first name, a last name and an age. Our handler does nothing, just returns unit.value, but what we care about is our validator, which validates that our create person command has a non-empty first name and not empty last name and an age greater than 0. In a folder called common, I have my validation behavior. It's the general validation behavior that you have when you're using mediator. We take the request, we try to validate it, and if we fail to do that, we're throwing a custom validation exception which has a parameter. It's a dictionary of string and array of strings. The string is the property of that field that we validated, and it had some errors, and this array holds the errors of that failed validation. Anyway, let's go and run this now that we changed some validation in the page side. Okay, it's running. Let's go to create a person. The last name, because it's still there that required, don't let us submit the form, but let's add something there. We hit create and we get that exception message: one or more validation errors have occurred. Okay, maybe in a real application you have a better message than that, which says some more details about what the validations error have occurred. But what about if we could succeed that validation in here? Let's see how we can do that. Okay, let's go and create, let's put it in the root of our project, a new class, and we will call that server validator. Okay, that needs to inherit from the component base. Okay, and need a private validation message store. Okay, let's call it message store. That's actually where our validation errors will live. It has our edit context, edit dictionary of field identifier, and the list of string, which is the field identifier. It's the property of our model, and the list of strings is the possible validation errors. Okay, now we also have a cascading parameter, and that will be our edit context. So private edit context, let's call that current edit context. Okay, now let's override the onInitialized method. So protected override void onInitialized, and let me disable the GitHub Copilot. Okay, in here we need to throw an exception if the edit context is null. Okay, is null. For now, let's just throw a general exception, doesn't matter for our example. Okay, we also need to initialize our message store, because if we have a new model, that onInitialize will be called, so we don't want to have the errors of the previous model. So message store equals new validation message store, and let's pass our edit context. Okay, and now in our current edit context, we want when someone requests a validation to clear that message store from previous validations. So let's do that. That can be null. Okay, and we need to do the same when a field property changes. So let me copy that and remove that with the onField change. Okay, and now we need to pass the field identifier, because we don't want to clear all the messages, we want to clear the messages for that specific field that changed. Okay, now we can also have a clear errors method in here in case that someone wants to use that. Errors, okay, we need to clear the errors, so message store dot clear, and we need to notify our context that the validation state has changed. So current edit context notify validation state changed. Okay, and now let's write our method for displaying the errors. Okay, first of all, what do we get back from that validation exception? We have a dictionary with a string key and an array of string that is our validation messages. So our method, we will call that display errors, need to take that dictionary as a parameter. So I dictionary string and array of strings, let's call that errors. Okay, now let's go through the errors. For each error in errors. Okay, we need to add to the message store, and let's see what that add method takes as parameters. We will use and now we need to add the errors to the message store. So message store dot add we need to pass a new field identifier. That identifier takes as parameters the model and the field name. The model, we can take that from the edit context, so current edit context dot model, and the field name is actually the key of the error. Okay, and the second parameter that the add method of the message store takes is the actual errors, so error.value. Okay, and now we need again to notify our edit context that the validation state has changed. So let's do that. Let's copy that from the clear errors actually. Okay, in our scenario, as you can see, the create person VM and the create person command, they both have the same name for their parameters, first name, last name and age, so we don't need to do some mapping or anything like that. Okay, now let's go to our create person page, and let's in here add our custom validator, server validator it was. Okay, we need to reference that so we can use it. So ref equals add server validator. Okay, let's copy that and let's go and declare that here, private server validator. Okay, and now if we have a validation exception, we need to display the errors, and we pass our failures in here. Okay, we still show that message because that will not always work. Maybe we have some difference in the names, etc. It's like a second or third line of defense, or maybe not line of defense, but a better visualize of the errors. Okay, let's go and debug this. Okay, let's put the last name, hit create, and as you can see, now we have that nice validation. Let's put a breakpoint to understand it better. Let's go to our display errors, server validator, display errors. Let's try to create that again. Okay, now as you can see, our errors have count of 2. The first one is for the first name, and the values are just first name must not be empty. And the second one, the key is age, so it's for the age, and the message is age must be greater than 0. So we go through our errors, and we pass a field identifier. The model is the create person VM and the property is the first name, and the error value is that the first name must not be empty. Okay, it will do the same for the age, and we have that validation visualization over there. Okay, in the next video we're going to see how we can manipulate that to work with complex type, that VMs that have child object, because that needs some reflection. It will be an interesting video. So anyway, thanks for watching and have a nice one.